They said, "Come to the wedding, Grandma. We won't start without you." I arrived and waited for 6 hours, but there was no wedding. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the phone rang. I remember I had just put the kettle on and was buttering a piece of toast. The kind of morning where nothing extraordinary should happen. Except it did. "Grandma." It was Sarah, my oldest granddaughter, her voice light, almost too sweet. "We've decided. You have to come to the wedding. Without you, we won't even start." My hand trembled a little on the receiver. For a second, I thought I hadn't heard her right. Me? Needed? It had been so long since anyone in this family had said something like that. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my throat tightening. "Of course I'll come." "When is it?" "This Saturday," she answered quickly. 2 o'clock, the reception hall downtown. You know the one near the old library. Don't be late. We mean it, Grandma. We can't do this without you." Her words filled me with a strange warmth, something I hadn't felt in years. You see, after my husband passed, I tried to keep the family together. Birthdays, Thanksgiving dinners, little gifts for the kids, a 20 slipped in a card here and there. But over time, I had felt them slipping away from me. Busy lives, unanswered calls, visits that never came. And now this? A wedding where I was not only invited, but needed. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, as if holding on to the moment. "I'll be there, darling. You just wait and see. I'll bring a gift, too." Sarah giggled. "We don't care about gifts, Grandma. Just you. Just be there." When the call ended, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the steam rising from my forgotten tea. My heart swelled with something between joy and relief. Maybe, just maybe, the family still wanted me. Maybe I hadn't been forgotten after all. I began making lists: what dress to wear, what cake I could bake to bring along, which pearls to take out from the velvet box in the drawer. I even considered calling my neighbor to help me with my hair that morning. It felt like a second chance. And I told myself over and over as I folded my best dress into the suitcase 2 days later. They said they couldn't start without me. This time, I really mattered. The morning of the wedding, I left earlier than I needed to. My bus wasn't until 9, but I was already at the station by 7, suitcase neatly packed, my good shoes polished. Old habits die hard, you know. I've always been the type to arrive before time, to sit and wait, rather than risk being late. The suitcase felt heavier than it should have been, though I hadn't packed much, just the navy blue dress I'd worn to Sarah's baptism years ago, a silk scarf, and the little wrapped box with a gift I'd chosen. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a gold locket I'd kept tucked away for years. I'd bought it back when I thought my daughter, Linda, might want it. She never did. But I thought perhaps Sarah, on her wedding day, would see its worth. As the bus pulled out of the station, I settled into my seat and let the hum of the engine blur my thoughts. The autumn fields slid by, gold and brown, and I found myself remembering other rides. Long ago, when Linda was just a girl and we'd take the Greyhound to visit her cousins in Ohio. She would press her face to the glass, asking questions about every farmhouse, every red barn we passed. I smiled at the memory, though it pinched at me too. Those days felt so far away, as if they belonged to someone else's life. Halfway through the trip, I took out my phone and scrolled through old messages. Weeks of silence from Linda, months even, except for the occasional hurried, "We'll call you soon," or "Busy right now, Mom." And yet, this week suddenly, they had needed me. I clung to that thought as the miles ticked by. Maybe this wedding was more than a celebration. Maybe it was a bridge, a way back into their lives. A young couple sat across the aisle from me, whispering and laughing, their hands intertwined. The girl caught me watching and smiled, a warm, careless smile that made me ache in a way I couldn't quite name. When the bus finally pulled into the city station, I gathered my things carefully. My knees ached as I stood, but I didn't mind. Not today. not when I was about to see my family come together again. I checked the time, still 2 hours early. Perfect. I would arrive before anyone else, maybe even help with last-minute arrangements. That was always my role. The one who prepared, who made sure things ran smoothly, even when nobody thanked me. And as I stepped off the bus into the crisp air, suitcase in hand, I whispered to myself like a prayer. They said they couldn't start without me. Maybe this time, they meant it. I arrived at the hall an hour before 2 o'clock. The place was familiar. I'd been there years ago for a neighbor's anniversary party. Big glass doors, a brick facade, a small garden out front where the roses had already lost their summer blush. I remember pausing on the steps, smoothing my dress, adjusting the scarf around my neck. My reflection in the glass startled me a little. Older, yes. Lines deeper around the eyes, but not invisible. Not forgotten. Not today. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of floor polish and stale flowers. There was no music, no ribbons, no sign of a wedding being prepared. I thought maybe I was too early. It wouldn't be the first time. I found a chair in the corner, set my suitcase by my feet, and folded my hands on my lap. At 2 o'clock sharp, I looked toward the doors, expecting Sarah or Linda or maybe even one of the boys to come rushing in with apologies for the delay. No one came. By 2:30, my heart was thudding faster than I wanted to admit. I stood up, paced a little, checked my phone. No new messages. I dialed Sarah's number. No answer. Linda's. Straight to voicemail. All right, I whispered to myself, forcing a smile. Weddings run late. That's just how it is. By 3, the receptionist at the desk gave me a puzzled look. She finally asked, "Ma'am, are you waiting for someone?" "Yes," I said brightly, though my voice trembled. "There's a wedding here this afternoon. My granddaughter's. I'm just a little early." Her brow furrowed. "A wedding? Today?" She tapped at her computer. "I don't have anything scheduled." The words buzzed in my ears, but I waved her off politely. "Maybe it's under a different name," I said, and sat back down. Hours passed. The light outside shifted, growing softer, then dim. I kept glancing at the doors, certain the moment I looked away, they would appear, dressed in their finery, laughing, surprised to see me there already. By 6 o'clock, I was still sitting, stiff and cold, my gift unopened on my lap. The hall had grown quiet. The receptionist had gone home, and I realized I was the only one left. I picked up my phone one last time. "Sarah," I whispered into the voicemail. "I'm here, sweetheart. I've been here since 2. Call me when you can. I don't know if something happened, but I'll wait just a little longer." I ended the call, though my hand shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Outside, the street lamps flickered on, one by one. My reflection in the darkened glass of the lobby was all that kept me company. And for the first time that day, a small, sharp doubt pierced my heart. What if there had never been a wedding at all? By the time the clock in the lobby struck 7, my hope had begun to unravel. I gathered my things slowly, trying not to let the receptionist's earlier words echo too loudly in my head. No wedding scheduled. It couldn't be true. Sarah had sounded so sure, so insistent. Why would she? No, I wouldn't even finish the thought. I stepped out into the cool evening air, the suitcase handle stiff in my grip. The streets were already alive with Saturday night chatter. Young couples heading to dinner, families laughing as they piled into cars. I stood alone on the sidewalk, feeling like a forgotten piece of furniture left behind after a move. I pulled out my phone again. First, Sarah. No answer. Straight to voicemail. Then Linda. Same thing. I tried Daniel, my grandson, the one who always needed money for gas, for books, for just this once, Grandma. His phone rang twice, then silence. Finally, in desperation, I scrolled to Robert's name. My son, Linda's younger brother. We hadn't spoken properly in years, not since a fight about money I'd lent and never saw again. Still, I pressed call. "Hello?" His voice was rough, suspicious. "Robert," I said quickly, relief washing over me. "It's Mom. I'm in town. At the reception hall near the library. There's supposed to be a wedding, Sarah's wedding, but nobody's here. Do you know what's happening?" A pause. Too long? I could hear him breathing. Then he chuckled, a sound without warmth. "Wedding? Sarah isn't getting married, Mom." The world tilted under me. "But she called me." She said dash dash. "You must have misunderstood." His tone was flat now, guarded. "Look, I'm busy. Don't call me about this again." And he hung up. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. Misunderstood? Number. I wasn't senile. My mind was sharp. Sarah had called me, asked me, begged me to come. The city lights blurred as my eyes filled with tears I refused to let fall. Strangers brushed past me, their laughter sharp, cruel somehow, though it had nothing to do with me. For the first time, the possibility rooted itself in my chest. This was deliberate. Not a mistake, not confusion. They had called me here, had me wait for hours, knowing full well there was nothing to wait for. But why? What had I done that was so unforgivable? I turned toward the bus station, though my legs felt like stone. Each step was heavy, each breath harder than the last. The night air bit at my face, but inside I burned with a question I couldn't silence. Why would my own family want to humiliate me like this? I couldn't bring myself to board the bus back home just yet. My knees ached, my heart even more, and I thought a cup of coffee might steady me. So I crossed the street to a small diner, the kind with neon lights buzzing faintly and windows clouded by steam. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of fried onions and bacon grease. I slid into a booth by the window, set my suitcase beside me, and ordered coffee from a tired waitress who didn't bother to smile. As I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, I felt the weight of the afternoon pressing down. Hours of waiting, unanswered calls, Robert's curt dismissal. My chest hurt with the kind of ache that no medicine could fix. Across from me, a man about my age cleared his throat. He wore a worn flannel shirt, his hands rough, as if from years of work. I realized he must have seen me sitting there with my suitcase, staring into nothing. "Traveling somewhere?" he asked gently. I hesitated, embarrassed, but something in his eyes was kind, without judgment. "I came for my granddaughter's wedding," I said softly. Or at least, I thought I did. His brow furrowed. "Which hall?" "The one by the library," I replied. He shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, I work over there on weekends. I fix their plumbing sometimes. They haven't had a wedding booked in weeks." For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard him right. My throat tightened. "No, that can't be. They told me, my granddaughter called. She said—" He leaned forward, his voice low, careful. "I'm sorry. But I was there yesterday. The place is empty. No decorations, no catering, no wedding." I stared at him, the words sinking like stones. My hands began to tremble, the coffee rippling in the cup. "So they lied?" The man's silence was answer enough. I turned my gaze back to the window, the neon glow blurring through fresh tears I couldn't blink away. Outside, young people hurried past, arms linked, faces bright. Inside, I felt as though the walls were closing in. "They said they couldn't start without me," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "But there was never anything to start." The man shifted, as if wanting to say something, but in the end he only nodded. Sometimes strangers know when words won't help. I left a few dollars on the table and stood, my legs unsteady. As I stepped back out into the night, the truth pressed down on me, heavier than the suitcase in my hand. This hadn't been a mistake. My own family had played me for a fool. And for the first time that evening, a quiet, cold anger stirred beneath my sorrow. The walk back to the bus station felt endless. My shoes pinched, my back ached, but none of that compared to the heaviness in my chest. I clutched the handle of my suitcase as if it might keep me upright, as if the little box inside, the locket meant for Sarah, still had purpose. But it didn't. Nothing did. Not anymore. I found a bench beneath a flickering street lamp and sat there, too drained to move. The city hummed around me, cars rushing by, laughter spilling from open restaurant doors. Everyone else seemed to belong somewhere. I was the only one left outside, forgotten. For a while, I tried to convince myself there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe Sarah had meant another hall, maybe she had gotten the time wrong, maybe. But then Robert's voice replayed in my mind. Wedding? Sarah isn't getting married, Mom. The smugness in his tone, the quickness to hang up. And I knew it in my bones. This had been no mistake. It had been planned. As the realization settled in, old memories rose like ghosts I thought I'd buried. Linda, at 16, slamming the door in my face when I told her she couldn't skip school. Robert, at 20, storming out after I refused to give him money for a car he didn't need. Even Sarah once, as a teenager, rolling her eyes when I brought her a birthday cake she hadn't asked for. "Grandma, you always make everything about you," she had snapped. I had laughed it off, though it stung. And now, here I was, sitting alone, humiliated, discarded. Because maybe, just maybe, they'd decided I had made too much about me. Or maybe they simply didn't care anymore. A bitter laugh escaped me. I had given so much. The envelopes of cash slipped quietly into birthday cards. The endless casseroles carried to Linda's house when she was too tired to cook. The knitted scarves and socks no one wore. But I made anyway. Because that was how I showed love. And what had I received in return? Silence. Distance. And now, this cruel trick, designed not just to exclude me, but to make me feel worthless. I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying the storm inside. For years, I had told myself they still needed me, that if I just gave a little more, time, money, care, they'd let me back into the fold. But tonight, staring at the truth beneath the street lamp's harsh glow, I saw it clearly. They didn't need me. They only needed what I gave. And I decided, right there on that cold bench, that they would get nothing more. I couldn't go home. Not yet. The bus ticket in my purse felt like an escape hatch, but leaving that night would have meant carrying the wound in silence. And silence, I realized, was exactly what they expected of me. So instead, I asked a cab driver to take me to Linda's house. The ride was quiet, the city lights streaking past like blurred memories. My stomach knotted with every mile, but I told myself I had a right to be there. A mother, a grandmother, doesn't need an invitation to her own family's doorstep. When the cab turned onto Linda's street, I spotted the house immediately. Lights blazed in every window, laughter carried into the night air. Cars lined the curb, far more than I'd ever seen there before. I paid the driver, straightened my scarf, and walked slowly toward the noise. As I got closer, I could make out music thumping faintly from inside, the sound of clinking glasses, voices rising and falling in bursts of joy. For a moment, I almost let myself believe it was a wedding after all, that Sarah had been telling the truth, and perhaps Robert had been the liar. But then, through the front window, I caught sight of them. Sarah, not in a white dress, but in jeans and a sweater, a drink in her hand, laughing with friends I didn't recognize. Linda, perched on the arm of the sofa, holding court as though she were the hostess of some grand party. Daniel, too, standing in the corner, already drunk, shouting too loudly at some joke. No wedding. Just a celebration I hadn't been meant to see. My hand trembled as I raised it to knock. For a few seconds, the thought came, walk away, don't give them the satisfaction. But I couldn't. Not after everything. The door swung open faster than I expected. It was Sarah. Her laughter cut short the second she saw me. "Grandma?" she stammered. Behind her, Linda's face appeared, hardening instantly. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, as though I were a stranger on her porch. I was invited, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking. You called me. You told me there was a wedding. Linda rolled her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, Mom. It was a joke. You take everything so seriously? A joke? My voice cracked. You left me waiting for hours, alone, because you thought it was funny? Sarah shifted uncomfortably, but Linda didn't flinch. You're always trying to make yourself the center of things. Maybe now you'll realize you don't have to be at everything. The words sliced through me, sharper than I'd imagined. I stood there a moment longer, my suitcase still in my hand, then turned without another word. Their laughter rose again behind me before the door even clicked shut, and that was when my quiet anger hardened into resolve. I hadn't planned on turning back. I had intended to walk away, take the next bus home, and let their cruelty speak for itself. But halfway down the driveway, the sound of their laughter followed me like an insult I couldn't ignore. I stopped. My grip tightened on the suitcase handle. And before I knew it, I had spun around, marching back to the porch. I knocked once, hard. The laughter dimmed inside. When the door opened again, Linda stood there, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp as knives. You're still here? She snapped. Yes, I said, my voice low but steady. Because I need you to look me in the eye when you explain why you thought it was acceptable to humiliate me. She scoffed, but I saw a flicker of unease in her expression. Don't be dramatic. It was a joke, Mom. Maybe a little cruel, but honestly, you've done worse to us. Worse? My chest tightened. Tell me when I ever abandoned you for hours on end, waiting for something that didn't exist. Tell me when I laughed at your loneliness. From behind her, Sarah's voice wavered. Grandma, please. It wasn't meant to. Don't, I cut her off, my eyes burning. Don't you dare soften it. You called me. You told me I mattered, that you couldn't start without me. Do you have any idea what that meant to me? The room behind them fell quiet. Even Daniel, flushed and unsteady, muttered, Come on, Mom, maybe we went too far. But Linda didn't relent. She squared her shoulders, her voice rising. You've always acted like everything revolved around you. The holidays, the gifts, the way you push yourself into every corner of our lives. Maybe this was our way of showing you. You don't always have to be included. Her words struck deeper than any slap could have. I felt my breath hitch, but I refused to let her see me break. You think I wanted to be the center? I whispered. No. All I ever wanted was to feel like family. To feel wanted. Every dollar I gave, every meal I cooked, every scarf I knitted, it wasn't for me. It was for you. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, if I kept giving, you'd remember I still mattered. For a moment, no one spoke. Sarah's eyes shimmered with guilt. Daniel looked away. But Linda only pressed her lips together, unyielding. I straightened my back, forcing strength into my voice. I understand now. You don't want me. You only ever wanted what I could provide. And that ends tonight. Then, without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked down the driveway for the last time, their silence heavy at my back. The bus ride home was the longest of my life. Not because of the hours, those passed in their usual measured way, but because of the silence. I didn't speak to anyone, didn't even glance out the window. I just sat there, my suitcase at my feet, the little gift box unopened inside. The locket that was supposed to be a blessing on Sarah's new life now felt like a weight, a reminder of how foolish I had been. When I finally stepped off at my stop, the night air was colder than before. My house waited for me down the familiar road, its windows dark, its walls holding nothing but quiet. Normally, I would have felt comfort at the sight of it. My own small place, my refuge. But that night, it felt like a tomb. I unlocked the door, carried the suitcase inside, and set it down in the hallway. The house smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets I tucked into drawers, the way I always had. Everything was in its place, neat and orderly, but the silence pressed against me from every corner. I boiled water for tea, more from habit than desire, and sat at the kitchen table. The cup steamed between my hands, but I couldn't bring myself to drink. My reflection in the window looked back at me, tired and older than I remembered. For years I had filled this loneliness with family. Phone calls, visits, packages sent in the mail. Homemade jam, knitted blankets, little envelopes of money tucked into cards. Each gift, each gesture, was a way of keeping myself tethered to them, of pretending the distance wasn't growing wider with each passing year. And now, I saw it all for what it was. One-sided. They had taken my love, my care, my sacrifices, and given nothing in return but this final cruelty. The kettle whistled again on the stove, shrill and piercing, and I realized I'd never even poured the water. I turned off the burner, leaving the kitchen in silence once more. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself sitting in that empty hall, waiting. Or standing on Linda's porch, suitcase in hand, begging for an explanation. I turned over, pulling the quilt tightly around me, and in the darkness, a decision formed. Quiet, steady, undeniable. If they didn't want me, then they would no longer have me. No more money, no more gifts, no more endless giving. They had left me with nothing but my own company. And from now on, that would have to be enough. The next morning, I rose early, though my body begged me to stay in bed. Habit drove me more than energy. The kettle on the stove, the curtains pulled open, the morning paper retrieved from the step. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. My hand shook slightly as I wrote down the names of each grandchild, each child. Next to them, I listed the things I'd given over the years. College money for Daniel, rent money for Linda when she'd fallen behind, groceries, gas cards, gift cards for birthdays, little care packages sent through the mail for Sarah when she was in school, cookies, sweaters, handwritten letters. As the list grew, my pen pressed harder into the page until the paper nearly tore. And what had they given me in return? A phone call designed to break me. I closed the notebook, placed it in the drawer, and knew what I had to do. That very afternoon, I received a text from Linda. Short, curt. Daniel's car broke down again. Can you send him some money until payday?
In the past, I would have answered immediately. I would have gone to my purse, counted out what I could spare, slipped it into an envelope, and mailed it without hesitation. Because that was what mothers did, what grandmothers did. We patched the holes, we filled the gaps, we kept everyone afloat.
But this time, I set the phone aside. I let the message sit, unanswered. Hours later, Sarah called. I saw her name flash across the screen and felt a pang. Old instincts urging me to pick up, to forgive. But I let it ring. When the voicemail came, her voice was soft, almost sheepish. Grandma, I was hoping you'd still make those cookies for me like you used to. Maybe send them this week? I listened once, then I deleted it. It wasn't easy. My heart fought me every step, whispering that this was spiteful, that love should overlook even cruelty. But another voice, new, unfamiliar, and strong, reminded me of that empty hall, of the laughter behind Linda's door, of the way they had looked at me like I was a nuisance rather than a gift. This wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. About finally refusing to trade pieces of myself for scraps of their affection. That night, as I locked up the house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not joy, not exactly, but peace. For once, I had chosen myself. It didn't take long for them to notice. A week passed, then 2. I kept my routines, grocery shopping on Thursdays, church on Sundays, letters to a few old friends who still remembered to write back. My days moved gently, quietly, like a stream finally free of debris. But on the third week, the calls began to pile up. First, Linda again, her voice sharp on the voicemail. "Mom, I don't understand why you're ignoring us. Daniel needs help, and you've always been there before. Don't start playing games now I deleted it." Then Daniel himself called. His tone was softer, almost boyish, the way he used to sound when he was 12. "Grandma, I really need that money. Please. I'll pay you back this time." I didn't answer. By the fourth week, Sarah sent a long text full of emojis and excuses. "Grandma, I don't know why you're mad. If this is about the wedding thing, it was just a misunderstanding, I swear. Don't take it so personally. Can we talk? I miss you." I stared at the words for a long time before setting the phone face down on the table. Because here's the truth. I did take it personally. How else was I supposed to take being left alone for 6 hours like a fool? How else was I supposed to take my daughter telling me to my face that I didn't matter? For years, I had trained myself to minimize the hurt, to say they didn't mean it, or they're busy, or maybe next time. But this time was different. This time the wound had gone too deep. At church one Sunday, my neighbor Marlene asked how the wedding had gone. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, shame threatened to choke me, but then I simply said, "There wasn't one." Her brows rose in surprise, but she didn't press. Instead, she patted my hand. "Sometimes stepping back is the kindest thing you can do for yourself." Her words stayed with me. I noticed things shifting in my own home, too. For the first time in years, the pantry stayed full longer because I wasn't baking or sending treats away. My checking account didn't shrink at the end of the month. The house felt lighter, as if my giving had not only emptied me, but filled the air with their demands. And now, with the demands gone, I could finally breathe. Yet beneath the peace, a quiet tension hummed. Because I knew the silence wouldn't last. Sooner or later, they would come. By the fifth week, the tone of their messages had shifted. The sweetness was gone, the patience too. What replaced it was anger, confusion, and desperation. Linda called one evening while I was folding laundry. Her voice carried sharp edges, even through the voicemail. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just cut us off because you're sulking. Families fight, they get over it. Stop being childish and answer the phone." I folded each towel carefully, as if her words had no power. But inside, they stung. Not because she was right, but because she couldn't see that this wasn't sulking. It was survival. A day later, Daniel appeared at my door. I saw his old sedan pull into the driveway through the curtain. He didn't knock at first, just sat there, hunched over the steering wheel. Then slowly, he got out and trudged up the steps. I held my breath as his shadow darkened the glass. 3 knocks, firm and impatient. "Grandma, I know you're in there," he called. "Please, I just need a little help. I'm behind on rent, just a loan. You know I'll pay you back?" I stayed quiet, heart pounding in my chest. My hand itched to reach for the doorknob, to do what I'd always done. Rescue, soothe, give. But I stayed still, the resolve from that night on the bench steadying me. After a few minutes, he cursed under his breath, muttered something I couldn't catch, and stomped back to his car. I watched through the sheer curtain as he drove off, my throat tight. By the 7th week, Sarah's voice trembled when she left her message. "Grandma, you're scaring me. You've never been like this. Are you okay? Please just tell me you're okay." I almost answered that one. Almost. But then I remembered the sound of her laugh the night she opened the door when she saw me standing there like an intruder. And I let the phone ring. The truth was dawning on them now. For years, I had been the invisible safety net, the quiet bank, the soft place to land. They had taken it for granted, assuming it would always be there. But now that it was gone, the cracks in their lives began to show. I imagined their arguments behind closed doors. Linda scolding Daniel for relying too much on me. Daniel blaming Sarah, Sarah insisting it wasn't her fault. I could almost hear the sharp voices, the slammed doors, the unraveling. And in the middle of it all, my absence sat like a stone they couldn't move. For the first time, it wasn't me left waiting and begging. It was them. And though it broke my heart, it also gave me something I hadn't felt in years: strength. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the sky was heavy with rain clouds when I heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel of my driveway. At first, I thought it was just the mailman turning around. But then, through the lace curtain, I saw not one car, but two. My heart sank as the doors opened. Linda stepped out first, her coat pulled tight around her, her face set in that determined expression she'd worn since she was a girl. Daniel followed, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. And then Sarah, hesitant, wringing her hands as she looked up at the house. They hadn't come separately this time. They had come together. I stayed where I was, standing in the hallway, watching their shadows move up the porch. The knock came, hard, quick, impatient. "Mom!" Linda's voice rang out, sharp as ever. "We need to talk." "Open the door." Another knock, this one from Daniel. "Grandma, please. I know you're in there. We just want to explain." Explain? My lips pressed into a thin line. Where had explanations been the night I sat in that empty hall? Where had apologies been when I stood on Linda's porch with my suitcase in hand? The knocking grew louder. Sarah's voice joined, softer, pleading. "Grandma, please." I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought it would be funny. I didn't know it would hurt you like this. "Please, open the door." I closed my eyes, pressing my back against the wall. Their words trickled through the wood, but they didn't reach me. Not this time. They knocked again, called my name, begged, demanded. At one point, I thought I heard Linda's voice crack just a little. But I didn't move. Instead, I spoke, calm, steady, through the closed door. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" My voice echoed in the hallway, surprising even myself with its strength. "You told me you couldn't start without me. And then you left me there, waiting, for hours. Alone. Humiliated." Silence followed. I imagined their faces, frozen, finally realizing the depth of what they'd done. "I was always there for you," I continued, my throat tightening, but my voice unwavering. "Every birthday, every bill, every little thing you needed, I gave. And when it came time for you to give me just one moment of belonging, you chose cruelty instead." For a long while, none of them spoke. Only the rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming on the roof. Finally, I whispered, "I won't open the door. Not today. Maybe not ever. You'll have to live with what you've done, the same way I had to live with what you did to me." Their voices rose again, desperate, but I walked away from the door. And for the first time in my life, I felt the power of saying no. I sat in my armchair by the window, the rain tapping steadily against the glass. Outside, the family lingered on the porch, their voices muffled now, worn down by my silence. I could see their shapes through the curtain. Linda pacing, Daniel sitting on the steps with his head in his hands, Sarah clutching her coat tightly around her shoulders. For years, that sight would have broken me. I would have rushed to open the door, to wipe their tears, to smooth over the cracks with whatever I had: money, food, love I couldn't afford to keep giving. But tonight was different. Tonight, I stayed still. Eventually one car engine started, then another. I watched their headlights sweep across my lawn before fading into the wet night. And just like that, the house was mine again. Quiet, peaceful. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the rhythm of the rain fill the spaces where their voices had been. A part of me ached, of course. I was their mother, their grandmother. Loving them had been the work of my life. But love without respect is a chain, not a gift. and I had finally broken free. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. I filled them with small joys I had long neglected: reading on the porch swing, baking a pie just for myself, planting bulbs in the garden. Each act felt like a declaration. I was still here, still whole, even without them. Neighbors began to notice too. Marlene dropped by with a basket of apples, and we shared coffee at the kitchen table. "You look lighter," she said, tilting her head, "as if a weight's been lifted." I smiled. Maybe it has. And she was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't checking my phone, waiting for a call that never came. I wasn't draining my bank account to fix problems that weren't mine. I wasn't baking or knitting for people who only laughed behind my back. Weeks later, Sarah tried one last time. A letter slipped into my mailbox, her handwriting looping and unsure. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it would hurt you that much. I miss your cookies. I miss you." I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer with the others. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But forgiveness, I realized, didn't require me to return to the same role. That night, I stood by the window again, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. My house was quiet, but my heart was steady. They had said they couldn't start without me, and now they knew the truth. Without me, they couldn't continue. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt peace.